his most recent fight, he fought Buchecha on like 10 days notice, and he had to put on like 8 kilos or something to reach the minimum weight to fight Buchecha, and Buchecha's walking around cutting weight, so he gave up like 35 kilos to Buchecha, like one of the best jits guys of all time, and flew to Singapore on however long's notice and just did it. So
The AllStar app, the #1 app in the business. UFC, Bellator, One Championship, PFL, and more. Get the app right now. Link in description. We spoke a few months ago after your Contender Series bout, and you're looking forward to getting on that UFC 284 card in Perth. You got your wish, promotional debut, home
yeah.
turf. Was it pretty easy to find an opponent who's gonna fly over to fight you, man?
Yeah, I think so. I had nothing to do with it. Obviously, Sean and Dana and the other UFC matchmakers deal with that, but they contacted me, really quickly after Contender Series, which I was rapt about, and said, "Hey, we've got this guy Don Shainis, and he's going to come over to Perth. He'll be on 284." So I was just pumped.
Wow, it was pretty simple because it seems like Dan Hooker, he wants to be on the card, but man, he's just having a hard time finding somebody.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a bit harder matching when you're matching the top of the card as opposed to the lower levels of the card, because guys like Dan, that so many factors come into it. Whereas for me, it's kind of like find another guy who's in his first one or two fights and let him go.
Definitely, definitely. But Dan, he'll fight anybody. I don't even think he cares about the rankings.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, he'll be happy to scrap, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
What's the travel like for you to Perth?
It's only 4 hours in a plane, and they're 3 hours behind. So we've already moved all my training schedule because we have to fight morning time over here. We've already moved all my training sessions to earlier in the morning, trying to coincide with Perth time. So I'm getting the body clock all sorted already.
Sounds good. Don Shainis, like you mentioned, thoughts on him and the fighting style that he brings to the cage.
Yeah, he seems like a pressure guy. He describes himself as kind of a ground and pound guy. So I imagine he's going to be shooting single legs and double legs pretty hard, pretty early. So I've been working a lot of takedown defense, and I think if I can just get behind my jab, I'm going to be able to find the range and start clipping him on the way in. And once that starts to happen, and it gets a little bit more desperate and a little bit more, shooting from outside of his range, then that's when I'm really going to start picking him apart. But yeah, he's going to be fit. So I'm fit. I'm known for fitness, and watching him, he looks fit as well. So it'll be a good contest. But I just think I'm going to be too sharp striking wise, and my takedown defense is going to be up to the challenge of that American wrestler.
How deep does your study of opponents go?
Pretty. I'm looking even into like the way he kind of uses sweeps and stuff from the bottom, what his go-to moves are. My coaches do most of that and then just prepare it for me to watch. And then we will probably do 10% of our training is specific to an opponent in a given fight camp. Like 90% of it is just getting the work in, getting your rounds in. But then that's 10% is sort of like, all right, he likes to use this guard, so we're going to practice here, or he's good from the back. So for example, with Rod Costa, with that fight, it was like, all right, Rod's really good if he gets on your back, right? So let's spend a lot of time with people started already on your back with chokes already locked in. Let's work worst possible scenario and get really comfortable there. And then, you have more confidence in the fight to be able to go in and adapt to what's happening in front of you because you know what they're going to be good at.
Outside of like the gym, are you watching fights every night? Like, is that something that you obsess about, or is it? How do you find
Um,
that balance?
So I used to watch so many fights. Like I was watching. It was actually a funny story. When I fought last Eternal, there was a guy in my opponent's corner named Wes Kappa, and when I was a kid and I was kickboxing, I used to watch Wes Kappa videos on YouTube, and I didn't even realize. And then we were standing in the cage, and you go shake everyone's hand, and I walked over and I looked up to shake one of the coach's hands, and it was Wes Kappa, and I looked at him and I'm like, oh shit, it's Wes Kappa. I'm like, hey, can we get a photo? And he was like, yeah, of course. And so I watch lots of YouTube highlights and stuff and watch technique videos. But as far as just sitting down and watching fights, like watching UFC cards and stuff like that, I don't do a lot of it.
Don, he made his UFC debut the same week you competed on the Contender Series, which is kind of like a weird coincidence, right? Did you know that he was cage side watching your fight?
No, I didn't. Was he there?
Yeah, he was there.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that a trip?
Yeah, that's weird as. You couldn't even get tickets. No one could get in, so he must have done something right.
Well, he had the Lauren Sanko hookup, so he got in there
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
watched
yeah,
the
yeah.
fights.
He was at Krause's gym, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Now
Yeah.
he's on the East Coast. But
Yeah,
I
I heard.
remember when you told me like you wanted an opponent, you were like, "Yeah, let's get an opponent from the East Coast that has to fly all the way to." You got their
Yeah,
wish, basically.
yeah, yeah. 100%. Let's go.
Did you go to the fights that week?
Nah, we weren't allowed. There was all these rumors floating about at the fighter hotel that like Zuckerberg had booked all the tickets and none of us were allowed to go and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if you remember that week. So,
Yeah.
we like even there was people there who I won't name them, but there was UFC media people there who work like big pay-per-view shows, and they were trying to get in and they couldn't get in.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
that's
it was it was wild.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. That was a weird week, right? Mark Zuckerberg and his whole debacle that he created on that
Yeah.
event. But anyways, the Contender Series experience, right? How much do you think that's going to benefit you in preparations for this debut?
Yeah, hugely, hugely. It was such a pressure cooker. I spoke to you about it after, I'm
Mhm.
sure, but it was the way the whole event was run was almost like trying to bring out, you know, who the guys who can deal with the high pressure. And I think that's kind of shown through in how the Contender Series guys are performing in the actual UFC.
Mhm.
I don't know the exact figures, but I imagine that people who are coming through from Contender Series are performing pretty well, as opposed to people who aren't at the moment, or people who didn't come through Contender Series. Um, but to get back in my home country in front of a crowd, which is, if you've ever watched me fight, I'm an energy guy, and I
Yeah.
like to feed off that energy of the crowd, whether it be support or, antagonistic. I like to get in there and feed off the energy and really zone in on my opponent. So I think it's going to be hugely helpful to have had the experience without that and now to go back to it.
Absolute MMA, one of the best gyms in Australia. The coaches, man. Let's get some shine to the coaches, the ones that work with you.
Yep. Yeah. So obviously the head man for us is Simon Carson. And he goes underrated in the MMA scene. He had his own little fight career. Like his most recent fight, he fought Buchecha on like 10 days notice. And he had to put on like 8 kilos or something to reach the minimum weight to fight Buchecha. And Buchecha's walking around cutting weight. So he gave up like 35 kilos to Buchecha, like one of the best jits guys of all time, and flew to Singapore on however long's notice and just did it. So he's a G, and he's super meticulous. Like he's a real type A, like very detailed person. He almost operates at a really high level. So you come in, and my whole training for the 10 weeks before the fight was all blocked out and color coded, and it was down to every day what session I was going to do and the intensity and the level that was the intensity of the session was adjusted for the level, so I knew what my goal was. I knew, like, right, today you're going in to win. Like, there's nothing else matters today. You just go in to win a session. Or as there might be a level that was lower than that, where it's like, okay, today you just want to learn, you want to get in better positions. It's not competitive for you today. It's about learning. So the way he put that stuff together is great. And then obviously my striking coach, Andy Colgrave, he's he is just, brilliant on the pads. He knows exactly how to talk to me to get the best out of me on fight night and during training. And then Raja Shippen, who, he kind of blends that line between mentor, coach, and training partner. And, as I get a little bit older, we're sort of blending more towards that training partner friendship rather than that top-down coach kind of relationship. But in terms of just getting knowledge from him, he's second to none.
Coming out of the Contender Series, man, what were some of the tweaks the team decided to make, to your schedule, to your training? Were there any tweaks?
Well, one was a big one, was that my striking coach was on a family holiday, and I don't begrudge him for that. But he was traveling around Australia for the 6 months before my contender fight, and after we won the Eternal one, after I defended the Eternal title again, he kind of looked at me and said, timing wise, like, I reckon you're probably going to get the call now, and I'm going to be away. And he was away for the whole camp, so I didn't hit pads for the 12 weeks before the Contender Series. I hit pad. The first time I hit pads was he came back from his family holiday. He came home early, drove the caravan home from South Australia. He came into the gym on Monday. We hit pads once, and then we flew out together on Tuesday. So probably the biggest change back in this camp is that I've actually got pads and I've got my striking coach back.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. And when you were in Vegas, right? Did you take the test that the fighters take at the PI? Did you utilize that?
Which test? I didn't do any
Like,
of the testing.
okay, all right.
Because
So do you work? Go ahead.
You're not allowed to use the PI as a contender. You're only allowed to use it after you get your contract.
Yeah.
And obviously, because I went the 3 rounds, my body was a little beat up after the fight, just like tired and that sort of stuff, the central nervous system overload. So there wouldn't have been much point doing any sort of benchmark testing then. But, I'm hoping 2 of my teammates at least can get on Contender Series for this year, and I'll go over with them just to make sure they can use the PI in the lead up to their fight, because I couldn't.
Yeah, you got to utilize that, right? Free ticket over to Vegas and help each other out for sure. Are you working with the PI in any capacity for this camp?
Nah, not particularly. One of my best friends is actually doing some work at the PI from back of Smash too. He's living over in Vegas, but no, I'm doing all my stuff locally. Same guys who I've been with for the last 4 or 5 years.
How do you see yourself, man, picking up your first UFC victory, man? This is a big one.
I reckon I'm going to crack the leg again, to be honest. I know I don't want to be a one-trick pony, as Dana would have called, but I really do see myself finding that leg again. It's always, people think that my leg kick is good, but my leg kick is good because my jab is good. So if I can get behind my jab and get him flinching on that left hand, that's what opens up the leg kick for me. So, I'm going to get out there and try and get that jab connecting to his left eye. And once that happens, that can give me the opportunity to go to the leg and really bury home some baseball bat kicks. Hopefully snap a tibia. Be good to get a little bonus check too.
No doubt. What's the story about you getting beaten out by a food blogger to win a Mazda? Is there?
Oh, yeah. No, so I got put forward. There was a fella who put me forward with a car dealership to be like an ambassador for the car dealership. And I made it to like sort of the final 2, so to speak. And then they decided to go against me, and I'm like, oh, fair enough. And the guy who got the car last year was like a professional soccer player here in Australia, so whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, so who beat me out, thinking it's going to be like a footballer or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, some kind of food blogger or something like that. And I was like, oh, you're kidding. I've been done by a food blogger. But yeah, I'm not too fast. I reckon I'm a shoe-in for the car deal this year. So 2023 financial year is my year.
Yeah, let's get Jack a car, man. What's up with that? Like,
yeah,
you can fight for it.
We'll fight. I'm happy to fight for a car.
February 11th, UFC 284. Jack Jenkins, man. Love seeing the Anzacs, the Aussie boys getting their opportunities. I know you've cut your teeth on the regional scene. You've done everything right. Let's see what you can do on the big stage, man. Thank you so much for the time.
Nah, appreciate it, mate. Thank you.